This house was built around 1410, more than 600 years old now, this building. And the first brewery was founded here in 1452. That means 40 years before Christopher Columbus discovered America, in this house was brewed beer already. In that time, in the time of the German Hanse, every citizen of Wismar could brew beer, who had a special house for brewing beer. For brewing beer, they needed large floors, different floors and deep cellars. And so most of the Wismarian houses in the Hanse time were built as brew houses, because people in the Hanse time drank much more beer than today. Today, Germans drink only about 107 liters of beer every year. 600 years ago, they drank up to 350 liters of beer every person every year. Because they had no choice, they had to drink beer. They didn't have other beverages. Water was not clean enough for drinking, was mostly full of bacteria and had to be boiled before drinking. They didn't know tea and coffee in Europe. They didn't know these soft drinks we have today, and wine was not growing in this area, and so they drank beer, because beer every time was available and storable for some time. But only about 1/3 of the Wismarian beer was sold here in the town of Wismar. About 2/3 were shipped to other countries, to Holland, to England, to Portugal, to Spain, to Scandinavia, especially to Sweden and to Norway, and to Far East countries, such countries like today Indonesia or Thailand, because the Dutch and later on the Portuguese, they had trading relationships to these Far East countries, and they took the Wismarian beers on their journeys, because the Wismarian beers of the Hanse time were very special beers. They have been the strongest beers of the Hanse, with an alcohol content of more than 10%. The alcohol was preserving these beers, and so they could ship them to far countries. So they needed many breweries to brew this amount of beer for the citizens and for shipping outside. And in the year 1464, Wismar had about 183 of such breweries, but only about 7,000 citizens. Nearly the whole city was involved in beer business, brewing beer, trading with beer, shipping beer to far countries. And so Wismar became very famous and very rich during the Hanse time. So they could build these 3 large churches and the other large buildings on this small area of Wismar. And they could do this with the money of the beer business. 183 breweries was the largest number of breweries Wismar ever had. By the years, the number of brewers and breweries was going down nearly every year. At first, there were too many brewers working, and so only these brewers with better beers, with high quality beers, could survive for longer times. And later, during the time of the 30 Years' War, from 1680 to 1648, about 1/3 of Wismar was destroyed, and so many brew houses were destroyed. And at the end of the 30 Years' War, Wismar fell to Sweden, and was belonging to Sweden a very long time. Just in the year 1903, Wismar came fully free from Sweden to Germany. And during the Swedish time, they had to pay very high taxes for shipping outside beer. And the Sweden brought their own beer to Wismar to many wars. Some years later, they wanted to reopen the Wismarian brewing tradition, the beginning of the industrialization. The steam engine was invented, and with the steam engine, they could heat their brewing kettles, could stir in their kettles, could pump the beer from one tank to another, and a little bit later, the cooling machine was invented, and with the cooling machine, they could brew for the first time all over the year, because for fermentation and storage of beer, you need lower temperatures, and so before the invention of the cooling machine, they could brew